Pastor Alemão King didn't know he had been abandoned. Then the soldiers saved him and discovered the truth. The rain poured down in heavy sheets, turning the road into a blur of water and headlights. A car skidded to a stop, its doors flung open. Seconds later, a German shepherd was shoved out into the cold. Before he could react, the doors slammed shut. The tires screeched. He ran after them, barking, confused. But the car only sped away, disappearing into the storm. What he didn't know was that someone was about to change his fate forever. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. Now, let's get into the story. The rain pounded against the asphalt, the wind howling through the empty stretch of road. The storm had come fast, turning the night into a blur of flashing lightning and pounding water. The car's tires screeched against the wet pavement as it skidded to a stop. The back door flew open. A German shepherd hesitated, his ears twitching at the sound of the rain. Then, rough hands grabbed him and shoved him out into the storm. He landed hard on the soaked ground, confused, scrambling to his feet. Before he could react, the doors slammed shut. The engine roared. The car sped off, its red taillights vanishing into the darkness. Rex ran. His paws splashed through puddles, his breath coming in desperate gasps. Rain clung to his fur, weighing him down. He barked, a plea swallowed by the thunder. His family was leaving. Why? He had done everything right. He had protected them, loved them. Why were they driving away? His legs burned as he pushed harder, faster, until his paws lost grip on the slick pavement. He tumbled, hitting the ground hard. His chest heaved, his muscles screamed. But when he tried to stand, his legs wouldn't hold him. The car was gone. Rex lay there, panting, rain pouring into his eyes. His ears flicked at the distant roll of thunder, but his focus stayed on the road. They would come back. They had to. So, he waited. Minutes passed, then hours. The storm didn't let up. The wind cut through his drenched fur. His paws were frozen against the pavement. Still, he sat, waiting. The road stretched on, empty. No headlights, no voices calling him back. His tail curled tight against his body as a shiver ran through him. And then, headlights appeared in the distance. Rex lifted his head, hope surging in his chest. He struggled to his feet, legs shaking beneath him. But as the car slowed, he realized something. It wasn't them. The vehicle came to a gentle stop, unlike the first. The door opened, and boots hit the wet pavement. A man stepped out, his face shadowed under the glow of his headlights. He didn't move fast, didn't raise his voice. "Hey, buddy," the man called softly over the rain. Rex stiffened. His body told him to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. The man crouched down, extending a hand. "You're all right." Rex's ears flicked. The voice was steady, calm, not like before. The wind howled again, sending another violent shiver through his body. His legs buckled beneath him, and before he could stop himself, he collapsed. The last thing he felt was strong arms catching him before the darkness took over. Rex woke up to warmth. It was strange. After hours in the freezing rain, his body no longer ached from the cold. Instead, something soft pressed beneath him, and the scent of dry fabric filled his nose. Slowly, his ears twitched. His eyes fluttered open. A fireplace crackled nearby, casting flickering light across the room. The walls were made of wood, lined with old military plaques and books. A faint hum of rain still pattered against the window, but the storm had weakened. Then, he noticed him. The man from the road. He sat on the couch across from Rex, his gaze calm but watchful. He didn't move fast, didn't make any sudden gestures. Rex tried to push himself up, but his legs trembled beneath him. His muscles still ached from exhaustion, and his fur was damp, but no longer soaked. Someone had wrapped a thick towel around him, drying him off while he slept. The stranger leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Easy, boy," he murmured. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" Rex's ears twitched at the voice. It was steady, strong, the kind of voice used to giving commands, but not harshly. Something in his tone was familiar. The man reached for something on the coffee table. A bowl. The smell of warm chicken filled the air, and suddenly, Rex realized just how hungry he was. His stomach growled, and he froze, ears flicking back in embarrassment. The man chuckled. "Guess that answers that." He slid the bowl across the floor, keeping a respectful distance. Rex hesitated. His instincts screamed caution, but his body betrayed him. His hunger was too strong. He crawled forward, his paws still weak, and sniffed the food. It wasn't a trap. So, he ate. The man said nothing, letting Rex devour every bite. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, he felt safe. When the food was gone, Rex finally lifted his eyes, watching the stranger. The man didn't reach for him, didn't try to pet him. He just studied Rex in silence. Then he spoke. "You're trained." Rex stiffened. The man leaned back, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "That stance. The way you move. You're not just some stray. Someone left you behind." The words sent a sharp pain through Rex's chest. The memory of the car speeding away flashed in his mind. The rain, the confusion, the realization that they weren't coming back. He lowered his head. The man sighed. "Yeah," he said softly. "I know how that feels." Rex's ears perked slightly. The man didn't elaborate. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. A metal tag. Rex's heartbeat quickened. "I found this on your collar," the man explained, setting it on the table. The engraved letters gleamed under the firelight. Rex. Canine Unit. A rush of memories surged through him. Commands, training drills, the familiar grip of a handler's hand on his harness. But that was all before they left him. Before he became nothing. The man ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, exhaling slowly. "I was military too," he admitted. "Army Ranger." His gaze drifted back to Rex, his expression unreadable. "I know what it's like to give everything and still be left behind." Rex stared at him. There was no pity in his voice, no sympathy, just understanding. For the first time, Rex didn't feel so alone. The man stood, stretching out his legs. "All right," he said, grabbing his coat. "Let's see if we can find out what really happened to you." Rex lifted his head. A spark of hope flickered in his chest. Because for the first time since that car drove away, someone was fighting for him. Rex watched as the man, Sergeant Daniel Cooper, grabbed his car keys from the counter. His movements were calm, precise. The kind of discipline Rex had seen before. The kind that came from training. "You coming?" Daniel asked, looking at him. Rex's ears twitched. A few hours ago, he would have ignored the question. He wouldn't have trusted anyone. But something about this man was different. He didn't push, didn't force. Rex stood, testing his legs. They were still sore, but the rest and food had helped. With a deep breath, he padded across the wooden floor and stopped beside Daniel. The soldier gave him a small nod. "That's what I thought." They stepped out into the cool night air. The storm had passed, leaving puddles glistening under the streetlights. Daniel opened the passenger door of his truck and stepped back. Rex hesitated. For a moment, all he could hear was the roar of an engine speeding away. His paws freezing in the rain, the sting of abandonment. He clenched his jaw, forcing the memory away. Then, with a slow exhale, he leapt into the seat. Daniel shut the door and climbed in beside him. "Good boy." The truck rumbled to life, rolling down the empty road. "Let's see if your old owner was dumb enough to leave a trail," Daniel muttered, pulling out his phone. He typed something in quickly, his eyes flicking between the road and the screen. You had a military collar, which means you were registered. If they dumped you, there has to be a reason. Rex lay his head against the seat, ears flicking at the sound of the windshield wipers. Daniel tapped the screen again, then muttered a curse. There you are. Rex lifted his head. Daniel turned the phone toward him. The screen showed a missing dog report dated 2 weeks ago. Rex, retired K9 service dog, went missing during transport. Last seen near Highway 42. Daniel frowned. Went missing? Or was dumped? Rex's heart pounded. They hadn't lost him. They had left him. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. There's a number here. He tapped the phone and held it to his ear. Rex sat up, watching, his body tense. The call rang once, twice. Then, a woman's voice answered. Hello? Daniel's expression stayed neutral. Hi, I'm calling about a missing K9 unit named Rex. Silence. Then the woman sighed. I'm sorry, but that information was posted by mistake. The case is closed. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Closed? Yes. We, found another solution. Rex's fur bristled. He didn't understand the words, but he knew that tone. Guilt. Daniel's jaw tightened. You abandoned him, didn't you? A sharp inhale. Then, the line went dead. Daniel cursed under his breath, tossing the phone onto the dashboard. Cowards. Rex let out a low whine. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, guess that's our answer. The truck slowed as he turned onto a dimly lit street. A sign loomed ahead. Animal Control Shelter. Rex's heart pounded. They were stopping? Daniel looked at him. Relax, buddy. We're not turning you in. Rex exhaled slowly. Daniel pulled into the parking lot, but left the engine running. He stared out the windshield for a long moment, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. They didn't deserve you, Rex. His voice was quiet but firm. But that doesn't mean no one does. Rex looked at him, ears twitching. Daniel reached over, scratching behind his ear for the first time. You're not alone anymore. Rex closed his eyes. For the first time in days, his heart felt whole again. The truck rumbled down the dark road, its headlights cutting through the mist left behind by the storm. The air inside was quiet, except for the rhythmic hum of the tires against the pavement. Rex lay curled up on the passenger seat, his ears twitching with every small movement Daniel made. Daniel tapped the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the road ahead. So they just dumped you, he muttered, shaking his head. A trained K9, abandoned like garbage. Rex didn't understand the words, but he felt the frustration in Daniel's tone. He knew that feeling. For hours, Rex had waited on that road, believing his family would come back for him. But now, he knew the truth. They never would. His body tensed, and Daniel must have noticed. Hey, the soldier said, glancing over. We're not going back there, all right? His voice was steady, reassuring. You're safe now. Safe. It had been a long time since Rex felt that way. The truck slowed as Daniel pulled into the driveway of a small rural house, surrounded by open land. It was a quiet place, away from the city noise. A soft porch light flickered in the darkness. Daniel put the truck in park and exhaled. All right, let's see if you're gonna bolt. He pushed open the door, stepping out. Rex stayed frozen in his seat, unsure of what to do. Come on, Daniel said, nodding toward the house. Your call, buddy. Rex hesitated. He had never had a choice before. For as long as he could remember, his world had been structured. Commands, training, missions. He was always told where to go, what to do. But this was different. This time, the decision was his. After a long moment, Rex jumped down from the truck. His paws landed softly on the damp ground, the scent of wet earth filling his nose. Daniel gave a small nod. Good boy. He led the way inside, flipping on a light. The house was simple but warm. Wooden floors, a fireplace, a couch with a blanket lazily thrown over it. It smelled like home. Rex stood by the door, unsure if he should step in. Daniel turned and watched him. You want to leave? Door's right there. He gestured toward it. I'm not forcing you to stay. Rex's ears perked. Daniel walked toward the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. But if you do stay, he continued, twisting off the cap, you better get used to it, because I don't leave people behind. Something inside Rex shifted at those words. Daniel sat on the couch, taking a slow sip of water. He didn't call Rex over, didn't try to lure him with food or commands. He just waited. Rex stared at him, and then he stepped inside. His paws clicked softly against the wooden floor as he made his way toward the couch. His body was still tense, still unsure. But something about this place, something about this man, made him feel different. Daniel glanced down as Rex lowered himself onto the rug by his feet. A small, tired chuckle escaped the soldier's lips. Yeah, he murmured, leaning back. That's what I thought. Rex let out a slow breath, his body finally relaxing. For the first time since he had been left on that road, he wasn't just waiting. He was home. The early morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a golden hue over the wooden floors. Rex's ears twitched as the world slowly came into focus. He blinked, his body still curled up near the couch where he had fallen asleep the night before. For the first time in what felt like forever, he hadn't woken up in fear. The rhythmic sound of soft breathing reached his ears. He lifted his head slightly and saw Daniel, still asleep in the armchair, his legs stretched out, arms crossed over his chest. The soldier hadn't left him alone. Rex let out a quiet exhale, laying his head back down. Maybe, just maybe, he really wasn't alone anymore. But old habits didn't die easily. The moment Daniel shifted in his sleep, Rex's body tensed. Instincts kicked in. He had been trained to be alert, to move at the slightest change. He didn't belong here. Or at least, that's what his past had taught him. He slowly stood, stretching out his stiff legs. His paws touched the cold floor, and he padded silently toward the door. It was slightly ajar, a test. If he wanted to leave, he could. No commands, no locked cages, no shouting, just freedom. His nose brushed against the wooden door, pushing it open just a little more. The crisp morning air drifted in, carrying scents of damp grass and fresh earth. His heart pounded. He took one step forward, and then a voice stopped him. You leaving? Rex's ears shot up. His body froze. He turned his head slightly to see Daniel still in his chair watching him. His expression was calm, unreadable. There was no anger, no commands, just a question. Rex didn't know how to answer. Daniel sighed, rubbing a hand over his mane before sitting up straighter. Look, buddy, he said, his tone steady but quiet. If you want to go, I'm not going to stop you. Rex's tail flicked uncertainly. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. But I gotta tell you, I don't think you really want to. Rex lowered his head slightly, his body still caught between fight or flight. Daniel gestured to the open door. That road? It doesn't owe you anything. He shrugged. You could go out there, try to find them again, but you and I both know how that'll end. Rex's chest ached, because he did know. He had chased them once. He had waited, and it had left him broken. Daniel exhaled and leaned back again. I can't tell you what to do, but I will tell you this. You weren't the one who left. They did. Those words hit deeper than Rex expected. Daniel stood up, stretching. All right, he said, walking toward the kitchen. I need coffee. You let me know what you decide." With that, he turned his back on Rex and disappeared around the corner. No commands, no pressure, just trust. Rex turned back to the open door. The world outside stretched endlessly, a reminder of everything he had lost. But when he looked over his shoulder, into the house that smelled of warmth and safety, he realized something. For the first time since that car sped away, he had been given a choice. And he wasn't ready to leave just yet. With a deep breath, Rex stepped back inside. The door stayed open, but he didn't need it anymore. The door remained open. The morning air drifted in, carrying the scent of damp grass and fresh earth. But Rex didn't move toward it anymore. Instead, he turned away, stepping further inside. Daniel was in the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He didn't turn to look, didn't acknowledge Rex's decision right away, but the faintest smile touched his lips. Thought so. Rex sat near the edge of the room, ears twitching as Daniel moved around. The clinking of the spoon against the mug, the low hum of the coffee machine. It was all so normal, so peaceful. Daniel grabbed a second bowl, filling it with fresh water before placing it near the counter. "Here," he said, nodding toward it. "Figured you might need it." Rex hesitated before stepping forward. The cool water soothed his throat, washing away the last traces of exhaustion from the past few days. As he drank, Daniel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching. "You're a tough one," he muttered. "Most dogs would have given up out there." Rex lifted his head, water dripping from his whiskers. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his short hair. "I've seen soldiers left behind before," he admitted. "Good men, strong men, people who gave everything, only to be forgotten." His eyes darkened. "It's not right. Not for them. And sure as hell not for you." Rex's ears perked slightly. Daniel reached for his phone, tapping on the screen. "But I don't think your story's finished yet." He turned the phone around. On the screen was a news article. "Abandoned canine found on highway. Family claims it was a mistake." Rex's fur bristled. Daniel scoffed. "Yeah, sure. A mistake." He scrolled down. "Looks like they gave a statement saying they thought you'd find a better home." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Guess they didn't think twice when they left you in the middle of a storm." Rex's jaw tensed. For days, he had clung to the hope that they would come back, that there was a reason for what they did. But now, staring at that screen, he knew the truth. They never looked back. Daniel set the phone down. "You deserved better." His voice was softer now. "And I don't know what comes next for you, but," he exhaled, "I think you should have a say in it." Rex's tail flicked slightly. Daniel walked toward the door, glancing outside. The sky was clearing, the sun peeking through the clouds. He rubbed his jaw. "I was thinking about getting back into work," he mused. "Something that gives me a reason to wake up early." He looked over at Rex. "Maybe you could use that too?" Rex tilted his head. Daniel nodded, as if deciding something. "Tell you what," he said. "Let's go for a ride. Just see where we end up." Rex's ears perked. Daniel grabbed his keys, heading toward the truck. This time, Rex didn't hesitate. He followed, leaping into the passenger seat, like it was exactly where he belonged. Daniel grinned. "That's more like it." As the truck rumbled to life, Rex settled into the seat. The road stretched ahead, unknown, uncertain. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't waiting anymore. He was moving forward. The truck rumbled down the open road, the wind rushing past as Daniel drove toward town. Rex sat in the passenger seat, his ears perked, eyes scanning the passing scenery. His body was still tense, his mind wired to stay alert. But there was something different this time. For the first time since that night on the highway, he wasn't looking for them. He wasn't waiting. He was moving forward. Daniel glanced over at him. "You ever been to a training center before?" Rex's ears twitched. Daniel smirked. Yeah, I figured. The truck slowed as they pulled into a large gated facility. The sign outside read, Veteran K9 Rehabilitation and Training Center. Rex tilted his head, sniffing the air as the scent of other dogs filled his nose. Daniel parked and turned to face him. All right, buddy. Here's the deal. Some dogs, they don't get second chances. They get dumped, forgotten. Some don't even make it out of the shelters. He exhaled, his gaze steady. But you're different? Rex blinked, ears flicking. Daniel opened the door and stepped out, leaving it open. He didn't say anything, didn't call him out. It was Rex's choice. He hesitated, staring at the open door. Then, with a deep breath, he jumped down. Daniel led him inside, past a few trainers working with German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois. Some were retired canines, others rescues with nowhere to go. A woman approached. Didn't expect to see you back here, Cooper. Daniel smirked. Yeah, well, found something worth bringing in. The woman looked down at Rex. Military trained? Daniel nodded. K9 unit, abandoned. But he still got the instincts. She studied Rex for a moment before nodding. We can assess him, see what he needs. Daniel crossed his arms. I already know what he needs. The woman raised an eyebrow. Daniel glanced down at Rex. A purpose. Rex didn't know what would happen next. But as he stood there, surrounded by people who saw him, who understood him, something inside him settled. He was home. Daniel knelt beside him, resting a hand on his back. Welcome to your new life, Rex. And for the first time since that stormy night, Rex felt it. He belonged. Rex sat at Daniel's side, his ears twitching as he took in the scents of the training center. The air was thick with the smell of other dogs, fresh grass, and the faint metallic tang of training equipment. The sounds of barking, commands, and distant whistles filled the air, but he stayed focused. This place was different. It wasn't like his old life, where his training had been rigid, his purpose singular. There was something softer about this place, something that made him feel like maybe he could belong here. The woman, Sarah, the head trainer, knelt down in front of him, studying him with careful eyes. She didn't reach for him, didn't try to pet him. Instead, she just watched, letting him come to his own conclusions. He's alert, she said to Daniel. Still in working mode. He hasn't switched off yet. Daniel nodded. Yeah. He's still waiting for orders. Rex's ears flicked at the words. Sarah hummed, then stood. Let's take him out to the field, see how he reacts. Daniel patted his leg. Come on, buddy. Rex followed, his steps cautious but steady. They walked through the training center, passing fenced-in fields where other dogs were running, playing, and going through exercises. Some of them looked like him, former canines, their postures still sharp, their eyes still trained to follow, obey, execute. But they were different too. Some were learning to be therapy dogs, some were being retrained for search and rescue, and others were simply here to heal, to be dogs again. For the first time, Rex wasn't sure what his purpose was. They stopped in front of a wide training field, empty except for a few obstacles and a set of cones in the distance. Sarah turned to Daniel. You want to run him through some drills, see where he's at? Daniel looked down at Rex. What do you think, buddy? Up for it? Rex's ears perked. Something in his blood awakened at the question. The need to move, to act, to prove that he was still useful. Sarah stepped back. All right, let's see what he's got. Daniel took a breath, squared his shoulders, then gave his first command. Sit. Without hesitation, Rex sat. Daniel's lips twitched. Good boy. Then, with more authority, stay. Rex held his position, muscles tense, waiting. Daniel took a few steps back, watching him carefully. "Come." Rex launched forward, his paws kicking up dirt as he sprinted toward Daniel, stopping perfectly in front of him. Sarah whistled. "He's still sharp." Daniel gave him a small nod. "Yeah, he is." But then, something shifted in his expression. He looked at Rex for a long moment, then said something Rex wasn't expecting. "Okay, go play." Rex froze. His ears flicked forward, his body stiff. That wasn't a command he knew. It wasn't structured. It wasn't a mission. Daniel crouched down, meeting his eyes. His voice was softer this time. "You can relax, Rex." Relax? The words didn't make sense. He had spent his entire life in service, always following, always obeying, always having a job to do. He didn't know how to just be. Sarah tilted her head. "That might take a while," she murmured. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, guess we've got some work to do." Rex stood there, frozen, unsure of what came next. But then, another dog ran past him, a young Labrador chasing a ball across the field. Rex's head snapped toward the movement, instincts kicking in. His body tensed, ready to track, to follow. But then he saw something strange. The Labrador wasn't training. He was just playing. The ball bounced, the dog skidded to catch it, then sprinted back toward his handler, tail wagging furiously. Something stirred deep in Rex's chest. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Daniel watched him carefully. "You don't always have to be on duty, buddy." Rex swallowed, his throat tight. For years, his world had been structured, his purpose clear. But now, he had choices. And maybe, just maybe, he could learn to live again. Rex stood still, his eyes locked on the Labrador playing in the field. The dog chased the ball, tongue lolling out, tail wagging wildly as if the simple act of running brought him pure joy. Joy. That was something Rex had never been trained for. His entire life had been about discipline, commands, and structure. Play had never been part of his training. Fun had never been allowed. Daniel knelt beside him, his voice low. "You don't have to watch from the sidelines, buddy." Rex flicked his ears but didn't move. His instincts told him to observe, to analyze, to be ready, but deep down, something inside him felt off. For the first time, he didn't know what he was supposed to do. Sarah watched him carefully. "It's going to take time," she said. "Dogs like him, ones who've spent their whole lives in service, don't just snap out of it overnight." Daniel nodded, resting a hand on his knee. "Yeah, I know the feeling." Rex turned his head slightly, watching Daniel. There was something about the way he said it, the way his voice carried the weight of understanding. Daniel wasn't just talking about Rex. He was talking about himself. The soldier exhaled. "All right," he muttered. "Let's try something different." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tennis ball. Rex's eyes followed the movement instantly. His muscles tensed, his training kicking in. He had chased objects before, but never for himself. It had always been part of a mission, a task. Daniel held up the ball, weighing it in his hand. "Here's the thing, Rex," he said. "You've spent your whole life being told what to do." He paused, then tossed the ball gently a few feet away. This time his voice was softer. Not a command, not an order. "Now, you get to decide." Rex hesitated. For the first time in his life, he wasn't being given a directive. No sharp voice telling him to fetch, track, bring back. The ball rolled to a stop in the dirt. Rex stared at it. His paws shifted slightly, his body torn between instinct and hesitation. He could run after it, but what would happen if he did? Would he be punished? Would he be told to get back in line? Daniel didn't push him. He just sat there watching, waiting. Sarah folded her arms. "This is new for him," she said quietly. He doesn't know how to want something for himself. Daniel sighed. Yeah, I know that feeling too. Rex flicked an ear. Again, that same understanding in Daniel's voice. Slowly, the soldier leaned back onto his elbows. You know, he said almost casually, when I got out of the service, I didn't know what the hell to do with myself either. Rex turned his head slightly, listening. Daniel let out a dry chuckle. I spent years following orders, waking up at dawn, sticking to a routine. Then one day it was just gone. His expression darkened slightly. And when you don't have a mission anymore, you feel lost, like you don't have a purpose. Rex's chest tightened, because he knew that feeling too. Daniel looked at him, his gaze steady. But the truth is, purpose isn't just about taking orders. He nodded toward the ball. Sometimes, it's about figuring out what makes you happy. Rex swallowed hard, his tail twitching slightly. He looked back at the ball. It wasn't far, just a few steps. But those steps felt like a leap into the unknown. His heart pounded. And then, he took the first step. It was slow at first, hesitant. He reached the ball, lowering his nose to sniff it. The scent of rubber and dirt filled his senses. He nudged it slightly. Nothing bad happened. No one shouted. No one forced him back into position. So, he nudged it again. The ball rolled, and something inside him clicked. Rex's ears perked, his tail lifting slightly. Then, without thinking, without waiting for approval, he took off after it. The dirt kicked up beneath his paws as he chased it down, his body moving on instinct. But this time, the instinct wasn't to serve. It was to feel free. Daniel sat up, a grin spreading across his face. There you go. Sarah smiled. I think he's starting to get it. Rex caught up to the ball, stopping just before it rolled away. He stood there panting, his mind racing. Then, he did something he had never done before. He picked up the ball, and instead of dropping it at someone's feet, waiting for the next order, he tossed it into the air for himself. As it fell, he leapt up, catching it between his teeth, his tail wagging. For the first time in his life, Rex wasn't waiting for permission to be happy. He was just living. Daniel chuckled. Yeah, he murmured, watching him. You're gonna be just fine, buddy. And for the first time, Rex believed it too. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden streaks over the training field. Rex stood in the open space, panting softly, the tennis ball still clutched between his teeth. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, and for the first time in a long time, he felt light. Daniel leaned against the fence, arms crossed, watching him with an amused smile. Didn't think you had it in you. Rex flicked his ears, tilting his head. Sarah, who had been observing quietly, nodded. This is good. He's learning to trust himself again. She glanced at Daniel. And to trust you. Daniel exhaled. Yeah. He pushed off the fence and took a slow step forward. All right, Rex. You ready for the next step? Rex's ears perked, his tail giving a slight wag. Daniel pulled something from his pocket, a harness. Not a military one. Not the heavy-duty kind Rex had worn before. Loaded with commands and responsibilities. This one was lightweight, simple. Designed for search and rescue. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're really thinking about keeping him? Daniel smirked. Do I look like I make bad decisions? She snorted. Constantly. Daniel chuckled, but didn't look away from Rex. He crouched down, holding out the harness. What do you think, buddy? Rex stepped closer, his eyes scanning the harness. His past had been tied to things like this, orders, structure, duty. But something told him this was different. This wasn't about being used. This was about being needed. Slowly, Rex pressed his nose against Daniel's hand. A quiet, deliberate choice. Daniel nodded as if he understood exactly what Rex was saying. Yeah, thought so. Gently, he fastened the harness over Rex's back. It fit snugly, but it didn't feel heavy. It didn't weigh him down like the past. Instead, it felt like a fresh start. Sarah crossed her arms. So, what's the plan? Daniel stood up, scratching behind Rex's ear. He's already trained. He just needs a purpose that means something. Sarah tilted her head. Search and rescue? Daniel nodded. Yeah. I figure if there's anyone who knows what it feels like to be lost, it's him. Rex stood tall, his body strong, his eyes focused. He wasn't broken. He wasn't unwanted. He had a future now. Sarah smiled. I think you just found yourself a partner, Cooper. Daniel grinned. Nah, he found me. Rex let out a quiet huff, something almost like a laugh. For the first time since he had been left behind on that rainy road, he wasn't chasing something that would never come back. He had found where he belonged. And this time, no one was ever leaving him behind again. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting long shadows through the trees. Rex stood at the edge of the woods, his body tense, his ears high. This was his first real mission. A little girl had gone missing overnight, 8 years old, last seen wandering into the woods behind her family's cabin. Hours had passed, and the search team was running out of time. Daniel knelt beside Rex, fastening his harness. His hands were steady, his voice calm. All right, buddy, he murmured. This is what we trained for. Rex's tail flicked once. Sarah, standing nearby, adjusted her radio. We've got teams covering the northern sector. You two, take the East Ridge. She gave Rex a quick glance. You think he's ready? Daniel didn't hesitate. I know he is. Rex didn't need to be told twice. He had a job now, a real one. Daniel stood up, pulling the little girl's sweater from a plastic bag. He held it out, letting Rex inhale the scent. The second the smell hit his nose, something inside him locked into place. This wasn't training anymore. This was a mission. Daniel took a step back. Find her, Rex. Rex didn't hesitate. He launched forward, paws digging into the soft earth as he ran, his nose low, following the scent trail like a lifeline. The world blurred around him. Trees, fallen branches, damp leaves, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was her. Minutes passed. The scent grew stronger. Then, a noise. A faint sniffle. A soft whimper. Rex's ears snapped forward. He turned sharply, weaving through the trees until... There she was, curled up at the base of an old oak tree, arms wrapped around her knees, shivering from the cold. Rex stopped a few feet away, panting. He didn't bark, didn't lunge. Instead, he lowered himself slowly, ears back, body relaxed. The girl lifted her head, eyes wide with fear. Rex let out a quiet whine. Not a command, not a warning, a promise. I'm here. You're not alone. For a moment, she didn't pull to. Then, she reached out. Her tiny fingers brushed against his fur, hesitant at first. Then, she clung to him, pressing her face against his neck, her breath hitching. Rex stayed still. Let her hold on to him. Let her know she was safe. A voice echoed in the distance. Daniel's. Rex? Rex barked once. Sharp, strong, certain. Mission complete. Within minutes, Daniel came crashing through the brush, relief flooding his face as he spotted them. He knelt beside the girl, checking her over. You did good, kiddo, he murmured, wrapping his jacket around her small frame. Then, he turned to Rex, pride shining in his eyes. Rex stood tall, chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. For so long, he had been lost. forgotten, left behind. But now, he had a purpose again. Daniel scratched behind his ears. "Told you, buddy. We don't leave anyone behind." Rex let out a low, content huff, pressing his head into Daniel's touch. For the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be.